From the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler, and I'm here again at the Ohioana Book Festival 2011 on the campus of Fort Hays in downtown Columbus, Ohio, talking to a number of Ohio-based or born authors. And I am talking to Suzanne Streeter Carpenter, who grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and has written a book called Riders on the Storm that has characters and is based on Cleveland, Ohio, right?
It's based in Cleveland, Ohio. All the events, most of the events take place in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. Well, tell me about this book. What got you started on it? It's got an interesting cover that is a collage, you say.
Yeah, that's a cityscape with the thinker with his feet blown off. Okay. Well, I went to Cleveland. I was in Cleveland in 1968, and it was a heck of a year. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, I've been trying to think. There was too much going on in that year for anybody to process. Okay. So I needed to deal with it, and I didn't know how. The thinker is on the cover because he's a good symbol for Cleveland in that process, right? The thinker was blown up March 24th, 1970. 9-inch pipe bomb, 10-foot fuse, by a bunch of left-wing radicals, supposedly, who were never found. Once you have some people who were never found and supposed to be a certain way, the historical novelist has a field day constructing this. Okay. So I have constructed this book around the year 1968, beginning in April 23rd, which is when radicals took over the school at Columbia. And in Cleveland, we knew about that immediately. We were phoned by the students who did it. And ends in December, and I took that thinker blow up and I just moved it back about 16 months, which is the historical novelist's freedom to be able to do that, to show how that happened. And it took me 8 years to write the book.
Okay. My question was going to be, well, how long did you work on the book, and what other kind of research did you have to do to get the what you thought was the mood right, or was it you felt like you had it because you had lived through it and you didn't? No,
I did lots of research. Okay. I did lots of research.
Tell me about that background.
Let's see. Well, there are a number of books. I didn't even know how many books there were. There are whole departments at universities studying culture and history in the 1960s. So I went back as much as possible to original documents, such as a little paperback called Shootout in Cleveland, which is a report that was done shortly after a shootout between African-American nationalists, black nationalists we call them, and the police, the Cleveland police. July 23rd, 1968, which was a major event and figures in the book. So I have that report in paperback, and I used that because it's amazingly detailed. There's lots and lots of information. I went to newspapers, I went to microfilm, I went to memoirs, I went to the standards books about the 60s, such as Todd Gitlin's Years of Hope, Days of Rage. And so forth. You want me to go on? The Walker Report, and there was a bookshelf full. Okay. Google. I talked to people. I did as much of my own remembering as I could. I wanted to recreate how it felt, but there's a problem with that, because how it felt at the time in 1968 was that everything that was happening was brand new and had never happened before. And if you look at that after 2000, it all looks very stale and cliched, which is the opposite of how it felt. So I had to reconceive it. And I think nearly every historical novel has as much about the time of the author writing it while it is written as it is about the time being written about. And so I started it in 2002 when we were getting into an overseas war that the country was dubious about, when there was a president people didn't like, when young men were fearing for their future because they were afraid they'd have to be called up and go to the military, when there was a disparity of wealth and a lot of inequality in this country, which has only grown since then, but it was evident then. So I was writing kind of about both times at once in some ways.
Okay.
The people who lived through it tell me I got it right.
Okay. What about the people who didn't live through it? Have you gone to people, younger people, and said, what's your response to this? How do you respond to it? What does it remind you of? Does it evoke for you something you might have heard before?
It's kind of interesting. There's a number of people who like it very much. They tend to be younger. Mm-hmm. People now in their 30s and 40s. I've had people come up and say, you know, you're a good writer and I like you a lot, but these people in this book thinks there's going to be a revolution. That's crazy. I can't understand it. Whereas people who are 22 and 23 read it and say, oh yeah, this is how it is. This relates. It's kind of interesting.
So do you think that there's a sense of, from people in their early 20s or something like that, that respond to this that they feel in their own time, or they think
I think so.
Okay.
They won't say that, you know, but not quite so much.
Okay.
But
now you've published essays and poems and short stories. This is a longer work of fiction.
This is the first book.
Oh, so you wouldn't call a collection of poems a book, or you haven't?
No, I haven't published a collection of poems. I've published individual poems in
Okay.
journals and individual short stories.
So when you're moving from genre to genre like this, what kind of difficulties did you encounter? How long did it take you to get comfortable in a different genre, or was that an immediate thing?
I wrote a whole nother book before this one.
Okay.
This is what they call the debut novel. The first novel I wrote sort of crept its way from short story to from poem to short story to novel. Okay. It started out as a poem, and so it was about 10 years I spent on that, and that was my training ground, the proving ground. And I still want to go back. There's a lot of good writing I did for that book, and I would still like to make it work as a novel. It doesn't. I don't think it does yet. I read it again. It's not as good as this one, and I want it to be better than this one.
When you say that it's not as good, what are some specific things that you look at? You say, I don't develop the characters, or is it the plot, or what is it that you sense in the last novel that you hit in this one, but you didn't hit in the first?
Every sentence in this book has been considered and reconsidered and reconsidered, and relates to the whole book. Okay. There's not much waste. And I've managed to create certain kinds of layers that, and the whole book hangs together. That arc I told you about in those people's lives is present throughout the book, and you can see it coming and you can experience it with them. That's what's hard to create, is that coherence real deep down. That's what I'm going for. Okay. And it's in the novels I like. I'm really fond of the big, thick Victorian novels, you know. Okay. Like Middlemarch, you know.
You have just spoken the word of the one novel that I couldn't do for my master's. I escaped Middlemarch, but I respect you nonetheless. No.
You may just not be old enough for it.
I know, being 22 like this, it's hard for me to. No, Middlemarch was the one book that I had trouble with, and I'm fascinated by that because this is a thick book. And you know, it's one of those things where I got into the characters of Middlemarch and said, you know what, there's not even a likable character in here for me, and that was one of the problems I had with that particular book.
Well, it's a Victorian novel.
Yeah.
It's old. It's a long time ago. She's writing in a different language, about a different culture.
Might as well be a different language, but no, I think that's fascinating. I'm always fascinated when people who are writing modern go back and they say, "Oh, Middlemarch or George Eliot or this," and I'm going, really, what is it that you're pulling from that? There's a certain area in there that I don't get.
One reason I mentioned that book is because I was at a book group not long ago, and they had just read Middlemarch. They had talked each other into reading Middlemarch as a book group.
Was it like a dare?
Sort of. And a number of them loved it. And a number of them really hated it. Oh boy, are we glad that's over. Come on. And the ones who liked Middlemarch a lot liked my book instantly.
Okay.
And the ones who didn't had more trouble with it. So I'm not going to push this on you. You'd just be missing out on something
I know,
great.
I'm missing out on one of the, it's the Riders on the Storm. Now, that's a song, right?
That's a
But
Doors song.
Did that come out in '68, or was it?
No, actually, I think that was 1970.
70?
We were looking for a title, and that was my editor's idea.
Okay.
Let's just look through all the song titles we can think of that could possibly fit. And this one could possibly fit, and it works.
Okay. But you don't have to pay the Doors.
Not for a song title.
Only 4 words long. Okay.
No, it's the song title, so
Right.
I don't have to pay the Doors.
Okay.
And
Good.
actually, it's used in a number. If you Google "Riders on the Storm," you get lots of stuff.
Right. Riders of the Purple Sage, things like that.
And that's in gray.
Yeah. So, you know, what advice do you have besides, most people say read everything. You're an associate professor of English, so you're going to be a lot more specific, and you say, this is what I tell my students who want to be writers to do besides read.
Besides, read everything.
Yeah.
Write a lot.
In the genre that you want to do, or dabble in genres, move around?
Oh, no, try them all.
Okay.
Try them all. I try them all. You know, journalism is a really good thing to write, no matter what you're going into. You want to be a poet, journalism is a great place to
Because
start.
it teaches concision.
It's a discipline. It's writing under fire. It's meeting deadlines. It's getting your words exactly concise. It's telling stories. It's maintaining a certain kind of distance. If you're a fiction writer, poetry teaches you a lot about language and the use of language and embedding feelings, the interplay of feelings and language. Fiction is a lot about feelings, about emotions. You read the nonfiction books about this era, and there's something missing. The feelings are missing because they're trying to get it right. They're trying to get precisely what happened, but they can't convey how it felt.
Because they're not supposed to be emotive. You mean they're not supposed to deal with...
Because when you deal with real people, you cannot possibly know everything about them.
Okay.
You can only know them from a distance. You can watch their behavior, you can learn what they tell you, but you can't know everything.
Is that a function?
Fiction, you can know everything. You can make up the whole person. You can understand their motivations.
So say, is that a function of internal monologue? You think that you're more likely to do that in fiction than nonfiction?
It's a matter of the genre.
Okay. All right.
It's the way the genre works, you know.
Okay.
That's one of the things. Actually, the difference between nonfiction and fiction is a contract made between the writer and the reader. That's why we get so mad at books like A Million Little Pieces, because the contract was, this is nonfiction.
Right.
So we didn't get mad at it's not being a good book. We got mad because we thought we were reading nonfiction. When we found out we were actually reading fiction, it was like, not fair.
Right. You know, the
know?
thing that I've always been fascinated about that, and I'm not taking sides, but fiction often says, well, I'm getting at a higher truth, or something like that. Or I've heard this said in fiction, you know, oh, you're going after the experience. And so there's always this moment. I get what happened with Million Pieces or Mortensen and stuff like that, but there's also this moment where I'm like, well, yeah, but you know, fiction, everything is sort of fictionalized. It's, what is that, the things they carried. The Vietnam story, the guy said, it's all true except the stuff I made up.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and Ron Carlson says, I write about my experiences whether I've had them or not. You know, sure, it's the construction of, it's the way a story is constructed. And you know, we're hardwired to think in terms of stories and narratives. And a nonfiction story writer has a bunch of different parameters. And there's some marvelous nonfiction writers. I really admire them. I envy them. I wish I could do that. I think fictionally. I make stuff up all the time. You know, I sort of
well, you're a professor,
invent
right?
things.
I mean, you throw papers down and you just grade down the stairs, right? And the ones that land at the top get an A, and you just, it's all fair. I'm kidding.
Not quite. I have this imagination that confounds that exercise, and in my imagination, every student whose paper I'm grading comes up to me and says, why? Why that grade?
I've had
what
the
did I
same,
do?
Yeah, I've had the same reaction grading papers. You know, you're grading it going, you know, you want to be nice and grade lightly. On the other hand, you're like, you want to be honest and say this was good, but not so much.
And they're very close to home. I'm in the middle of grading right now.
Okay, great.
Grades are due on Tuesday. Okay.
And that helps to the evergreen nature of our YouTube video. Anyway, it's always, so you are now going to be always in the midst of grading on YouTube.
Well, that's consistent with my life.
Okay, good. Well, Susan Carpenter.
Streeter,
or Carpenter. I'm sorry. I can't read, can't speak. I appreciate very much your being here on Writers Talk and talking to us about your book, Writers on the Storm, which is available on Amazon, any other places.
It's available from my publisher, which is Bottom Dog Press, out of Huron, Ohio.
Okay.
And worth checking out.
Bottom Dog Press.
Right, appreciate them.
Sure.
And yeah.
Okay.
I hope people give it a chance, and it's in many of the libraries in Ohio.
Good. And if you're, it's going to be right next to Middlemarch.
I hope not.
I hope not. Okay. All right. So, from the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Doug Dangler. Keep writing.